Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is Megan Raymond with WCET. Our webcast today, Identity, Authentication and Proctoring Systems, Promoting Integrity While Protecting Privacy. Thank you to Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available. If you have any technical issues, please contact Blackboard directly. Today, the speakers have mic access, and we invite you to communicate with us via the chat box. So as we go along, go ahead and enter your questions, or if you have resources or comments, go ahead and type them into the chat box, and the moderator and I will be watching that as we go along. This webcast is being recorded. We will send you a link to the recording, the PowerPoint slides, and any resources that will be shared. Usually we try to do that within 1 week, but we'll try and get that out a little sooner for you. Again, as we go along, go ahead and enter your questions in the chat box, and we'll be keeping track of those, and we'll get to the questions at the end of each section. We have a wonderful moderator today. Justin Lauder is the Assistant Vice Provost with Texas Tech University and a member of our steering committee. I'd like to go ahead and have Justin take it over. We have a lot of content to get through today.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everybody for joining us today for our webinar. As Megan said, we have quite a bit of content to get through to talk about student authentication and identity verification. And I think this is a very timely conversation to have because, as many of us saw, the idea of integrity in online learning popped up in some of the presidential candidates' speeches and content, and WCET's Russ, Director of Policy and Analysis, went on the record and talked about how the field has integrity, and we need to really discuss this broadly and have our leaders realize what we're doing in distance ed. So with that, we have invited some great speakers from three very good integrity providers, and I will ask them to introduce themselves when they get started with each of their presentations. We have Biometric SIG, ProctorU, and Software Secure that's going to talk to us about different instances in integrity and authentication. And then Karen with the Higher Learning Commission is going to talk to us about accreditation and what accreditors are looking for. With that being said, I would like to ask Doug with Software Secure to introduce himself and take about 3 minutes to go through and discuss what your provider is doing for online proctoring and student authentication.
Sure. Thanks,
Doug?
Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Winnig. I'm the CEO and the founder of Software Secure. So let me move over to a slide that should help understand what we do. I like to describe our offering called Remote Proctor Now, RPNow, as it relates to all the other options out in the market. Because as most of you already know, and if not will after this webinar, there are a variety of platforms available to help schools protect the academic integrity of online exams. And this slide puts those offerings in 3 broad categories. On the far left-hand side, there are those platforms that offer live proctoring. As Jared will describe, ProctorU's excellent work in that area. These platforms require a student to schedule a time to have a human on the other end of a webcam proctor real-time during the exam, while also watching other test takers, much like the traditional in-class mode of proctoring. On the far right-hand side of this slide, we group what we call the automated proctoring platforms. These platforms enable the students to log in and to take the test whenever the student wants. The system records the webcam and the audio occurring during the exam, and then run that data through a computer algorithm to flag anomalies and report all anomalies to the schools for their review. So basically it flags too much stuff, too much motion, too much noise, and then the school decides if that too much is in fact cheating or something else. And we're right in the middle. We offer self-service on-demand testing. We record everything that takes place during the exam, webcam, audio, and video, as well as everything that's seen on the student's screen. But then we have specially trained and certified proctors review each of the data feeds, using our own proprietary reviewer platform that marks up the video and delivers what we conclude to be reviewed, what we conclude needs to be reviewed by the school. Not because we saw too much motion, but because we saw a student open a book as opposed to stand up to turn off a fan. We invented this model because our focus is on maximizing the efficacy of proctoring, which we do by making sure that every exam is reviewed in its entirety by 2 certified proctors that can be monitored and assessed. Yet we also maximize student convenience by not requiring a live proctor to be scheduled, or present during that exam. We started as a technology company offering the first patented lockdown technology in the market. But as we turned to focus on proctoring for the distance learning market, we became a services company, specially trained people to proctor accurately and efficiently. So we now marry those two assets. We use technology to make taking an online exam convenient, and we use technology to ensure our human review of those exams is accurate, cost-effective, and convenient to the faculty and the administrators. So let me just take one more minute and walk you through sort of that student experience. The student clicks on a link provided by their school, which brings them to a website that guides her through a login process. That's up in the left-hand area of this image. The student chooses her exam, is provided whatever exam rules apply to that particular exam, say nothing on your desk, closed books, no use of digital tools. She captures a picture of her ID, a picture of her face to compare, and then using the webcam provides a scan of the room which demonstrates her compliance with the noted exam rules and helps us proctor the video going forward. So if the exam policy said you can review this particular book, we see the book in the room scan and we see what she's looking at during the exam. From there, once the students provided us with the authentication data and certified her compliance, the software does two things, and that's in the bottom. First, it layers whatever security the faculty member requested as part of the exam rules, no chat programs, no access to Microsoft Word or Excel, for example, thereby limiting ways a student could cheat. Then it automatically enters the student into the exam, so there's no need for a human to type it in or provide the student the password to get in that they could then give to someone else. So the only way to get into the exam is to use the RPNow software. And then the far right-hand corner, once they're in the exam, we're collecting the webcam video and the audio, and we're making a video of everything that the student sees on their screen. Students take the test the way they always would, except they also see a contact support button if they need it on the browser. So they have immediate access to support during the login process or while they're in their exam. And then they simply exit the exam and close the RPNow software. So during the exam data goes where it always went, to Blackboard or Canvas to the school. And the environment data, the video and the audio, goes to our servers for review by our proctors after the fact. That's a decent overview of sort of how we approach proctoring and authentication as relates to online exams. Justin, you want to take that back?
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. Next, what we want to do is turn it over to Jared Morgan with ProctorU, and I'm going to go forward just a little bit and let Jared talk a little bit about ProctorU and their product and what the student experience is like with ProctorU. Jared?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here, and certainly a lot of respect for the WCET organization, and glad to be a part of this webinar. My name is Jared Morgan. I'm the COO and co-founder of ProctorU. Many of you on the call, I believe we've worked with through the years. We've been around since 2008. We have quite a bit of our partners on here, so hello to all of you out there. We've been around for a little bit of while, and most folks know us for our online proctoring. Doug did a great job of highlighting the differences in approaches for what we do. ProctorU is certainly known for live proctoring. We use a live person in one of our facilities to monitor examinations, but we also this year have gotten into identity verification as a standalone service, and that's what our service called UCard is. Essentially what UCard is a service where a live person connects up to one of your students and creates an identity record, very similar to what you might see if a student was coming to a student center to get their ID card when they enrolled in your physical campus. This program actually came about from a partnership with Columbia College in Missouri. They contacted us a few years ago for an experiment. They asked us to, rather than proctor exams, just simply connect to their students and try to identify who they are, create that record, and let them use that for various purposes. A year or two later, we got the results of how it had gone, and they reported that they had been able to wipe out an estimated $6 million in financial aid fraud by using services like UCard. And so we were really excited about that. We spun that out into its own service, and we'll certainly touch on that a little bit later. What really sets ProctorU apart, we feel like, is its people. We take pride in where we employ our people, who they are. All of our proctors work in our facilities. Here's some photos from a couple of our facilities. All of our proctors are located in the United States, so we have 2 facilities in California, 1 in Alabama, where I'm located, Chandler, Arizona, and we actually are just opening our Austin, Texas office as well. So the big thing when it comes to proctoring for us is how we take that approach. So we use live people, and we do three things. We have to see the test taker, which is how we see them on the webcam. That's the most obvious piece of what we do. We see what they are doing, so we actually see their computer screen in real time. We can actually see what it is they're doing, if they're opening up another browser, if they're chatting with someone. Much like you are watching this webinar, we can see their computer screen. And we know who they are, and so we use a multi-factor approach to authentication based on who that person is and the needs of the partner institution that we're working with to identify who we are, who we are working with. So we have see the students, see what they're doing, and know who they are. That's how we approach proctoring. Also really happy that we worked through the Student Privacy Pledge. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Several companies signed up to make sure that we are managing student data the right way. And I'm very excited to be here as a part of this webinar. Justin?
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. Finally, Jeff from Biometric SIG is going to talk to us about their product. And Jeff, why don't you take us through BioSig and talk about the student experience and what it's like for proctoring and identity verification.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with this audience. We're a little bit different, as you'll find out here. We focus in on identity authentication, and we're the world's first biometric password using BioSig ID. And what it is really is it's gestures, and these are unique to each one of us. So in seconds, with only 4 characters or letters or any combination, BioSig is able to establish the user identity. We can do this on any device. The input is only with your finger, mouse, or stylus. It's not fingerprints, and it doesn't require any additional hardware. And we're able to determine if the registered student or the user is the same one who's accessing the coursework. So we're able to authenticate students throughout the entire course and at the earliest contact in the touch of command with your students. So we're into identity authentication. This is what we do. We're a technology company. And this is where the world is heading to. Is this the person who they say they are? Or is it just a person who has knowledge that allows them access? So if that's indeed what's happening, then the incidences of fraud and cheating are just getting out of proportion, because we really don't know who those students are. And it's not just at the time of taking a final event exam, it's through the other 7 weeks of the course in terms of the tests and the quizzes and all the rest of that. That's where a lot of the academic activity and the fraud and cheating are taking place. So in addition to some of the challenges that you all are facing out there in your business, you've got others here, such as you have many gradable events in a course. And who's doing that work? Well, this is becoming a prime candidate of concern for financial services, for the OIG, for the Department of Education. We also know there's thousands of sites out there that are offering services. There's billions of dollars of fraud. Everything's pushing towards stricter student ID verification. There's more oversights. There's more audits coming. There's accreditation risks, regional and federal. You've got more privacy and liability issues that are emerging. And on the other side here, you've got some environmental demands that are helping drive some of this change. White House, for example, President Obama just came out with a new decree that everybody should be using multi-factor authentication with all of the agencies within 18 months. We've got banks and lots of other companies that are asking for more ID proofing as they're trying to push services to the virtual world. So identity theft's on the rise. PIN and passwords are no longer valid. This was a clear statement in the OIG final audit report that came out. Proctoring is great, but it's only a single point in time. And can we get any better than a single point in time and look at what's happening during that entire 8-week session, if that's the length that you're having? All biometrics are not the same, and some of them are keeping too much data, and this is increasing liability. So what do we do for our clients? Well, we've introduced real-time event notifications and BioProof-ID. So the real-time event notifications is how we're able to alert our customers that some adverse, abnormal, suspicious activities going on. This is a series of data that we call through tens of thousands of activities on your student base, the needle in the haystack, so to speak, and we're finding all of this information, and we're able to report that using SMS or email to you in real time. And depending on your business policy, you could actually shut down access to that exam by that student. One of our clients, for example, found 58 students just in their spring session that they were able to identify as cheaters, and gave them different warnings and reprimands. We also have a full forensic reporting tool that takes a look at a number of different issues that you need to understand in your patient or your student base. Along with one of our alliance partners, Be Virtual, we're able to verify identity and witness the BioSig-ID creation of that password. This meets the new ANSI standards. We'll learn a little bit more about that in our participation with this later on in the session. But all of this allows us continuous authentication, and that's what the world, I believe, is going to and wants. So just a quick wrap up, we don't require any hardware. We have and provide continuous, non-intrusive, multi-factor ID authentication. We've got tremendous positive user experience, 98% of surveyed candidates. In fact, interesting enough, 45% of the students say that this is somehow intriguing. There's little faculty effort required. We're in a number of countries where students are authenticating because we're cloud-based. We deterred dishonesty and fraud. We're patented. And the good news is that in terms of cost, just by looking at comparison to a live proctoring session, we're approximately 50% less, and we give unlimited use for that entire year, independent of the number of courses that your students may be taking. And the last one is just Title IV compliance assured. This is a big item that's emerging. And on the bottom, you can just see some of the work that we've been doing. We've been selected by the White House, and CIO review, tech eds, and independent testing with Tolly. So that's a very quick, short, snappy overview of some of the things that we do. And I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. What we now want to do at this portion of the webinar is talk to our speakers about a couple of different areas and some important issues that institutions want to know when they are looking at online proctoring and identity verification solutions. So first, and we'll just go first to Jeff, then to Doug, then to Jared. First, how are faculty notified of suspicious behavior? And also, if you record the sessions, how can faculty then review the video content?
Thanks. Just in terms of the suspiciousness nature, I talked briefly about the real-time event notifications that we're able to send out by either SMS to a point of contact within the client base, or if the business policy allows it, then you can send it out to whomever you wish, faculty or otherwise. And I mentioned we can actually stop access to that event if the business policy calls for that. So the R10 is the real-time event notification, and it's a series of activities that, when added together, create a level of suspicious activity. So for example, if Johnny's coming in today from an IP location using a certain ISP from somewhere in California, and tomorrow Johnny's coming in from someplace either overseas or in a place that he's physically impossible to get to by car or by plane, we'll pick that up immediately, and that's the kind of thing that we're able to let our clients know about. And so how do we protect student privacy? Well, we basically don't retain any personal information. We're basically collecting behaviors. And to this point, we store any and all of the data on what's called air-gapped servers, which are non-connected to the internet. And we don't record the session, unlike what my colleagues do with some of their proctoring. I think the last question that I was able to address was who has access to the data, the video, the transcription of the students' activities. And access to raw data is restricted only to 2 of our technical administrators at BSI. Access to the reporting tools that contain data is restricted to the individual that the client approves. And data transport and security at BSI strictly adheres to the FERPA best practices and standards. Back to you, Justin.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Doug?
Yeah, so let me flip back, if I can, sorry, to a couple slides that I put together to help sort of get a visual of what the faculty or the admin experience is like on the back end after a student's taking an exam. So after an exam, first when a school starts working with us, they determine whether or not it's an administrator that wants to get these suspicious video reports or if it's the faculty directly. They get a report that looks much like what's in front of your screen now, now with the exam name, the number of students that that took the exam, and whether or not anyone was flagged for suspicious behavior. In this report, Mark Masacchio was flagged. Poor Mark's one of my sales guys, and he's always cheating, and we're always talking about that. And below his name, they're the actual events that occurred, and all of these are hyperlinked. So whoever's receiving this report, and it's only the authorized recipient that's set up when we first create the account, either an admin or a faculty member, can click on it and go directly to the video to see what event has been flagged. So this is our reviewer platform that you're now seeing in front of you. This is Mark seen talking on the phone. Below his picture, you see a bunch of bubbles. Green is where he started the exam after the authentication. Red is everything that's flagged. And then to the right of the screen, there are the comments that the reviewer put in. And you can even dive deep into who the reviewer was and whether or not it was altered by the second reviewer or overruled to reach the final conclusion. So you see what we found, and then you can click right to it and actually see it. The top of the screen, you can see that there's another button for desktop video. So if there was something suspicious that they surfed, in other words, it wasn't a lockdown exam, but they weren't supposed to open digital material, but they were recorded doing so, you'd be able to see that here in this recording as well. So this report makes it incredibly efficient for the school to confirm what we've done, the work we've done as proctors. And to do it both to confirm what we've done and also just to check up on the work we're doing, and they can actually see exactly how we do it. On the right-hand side, there's an audio meter, and there's summaries, and as I said, there's detail about who's doing the proctoring. So all of that can be tracked and audited, and we provide additional data assessing that process periodically, every term, every semester, end of year, however the school would like to do it. As it pertains to data protection, we use every precaution in the market to protect the data. We encrypt everything that we store. We actually separate the data we store, so all the video and the audio is kept on one servers, and all the metadata, any information that would help you identify who the picture is of, is stored in a separate location, separate container, separate server. We only permit authorized access from administrators and faculty that are registered as they start working with us. They're provided usernames and passwords that are changed. We, as well as all of our hosting companies, all adhere to the U.S. Department of Commerce Safe Harbor program. And most importantly, we make sure that we tell the students everything we're doing throughout the process. So one of the great things about this platform is that we've created a communication tool with the student to tell them what to expect coming in, to tell them what we're doing, and that they can contact us if they have any questions. And we keep everything incredibly safe and secure.
Great. Justin? Thank you, Doug. Jared, why don't you talk to us a little bit about how faculty are notified and how your product protects student privacy and who has access to the data and the video once the activity is online for the online course or test?
Sure thing, and thank you for that. So it really depends on the situation. Proctoring is obviously very human-driven, so it really depends on exactly what has happened during that testing session, when that will depend on, or that will affect how we react to it. If there is some kind of sort of gray area, suspicious activity, the benefit of having a live person connected is that we can work to prevent any kind of data breach or academic integrity breach from happening before it actually happens. So if you see somebody looking off of the camera, you see somebody reaching down for a piece of paper, you can politely remind them that they need to keep their eyes on the screen or that there's no material allowed in this exam. We find that most of our situations can be handled by prevention, and that's really what we train our proctors to do. Now, there are situations every day that go past that, and we have to actually report it back to the institution. If there is some kind of breach of academic integrity, then we're going to actually send a report over that will have all the pertinent information. It could have screenshots, it could have video, the video recording, it could have chat logs, IP logs, it could have all sorts of different things. That's sent over, and then someone from our quality control staff that actually works on that will actually be in contact with that faculty member to walk them through any questions they may have about that. If there is an exam-related issue, so it's not necessarily an academic integrity issue, maybe there was an issue with a particular question on the exam, maybe the student got disconnected during the middle of the exam and we need to reset it. We have a staff called our advocacy staff, the student advocates, and what they do will is actually contact the school on behalf of the student, explain exactly what's going on, and then work them through resolution of the problem. And so that's a service that's available to all the partners that we have. In addition to that, we do have a newer service that started in the last year for some of our larger partners that have what we call hyperdense exams, and so these will be exams where several hundred people are taking this exam within an hour or two period. We have the ability for one of our faculty members to be actually on camera or over the phone or online connected to someone within our facility at all times. So that way they can address things in real time as they come up and get a lot of people through this exam in a really short amount of time. To address the other two questions that you had, and we're skipping ahead a little bit, how do we look at student privacy and protect student data? For us, it really goes back to FERPA, right? And that's really what governs everything. So the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, all of our employees are actually trained on FERPA before they can ever touch a student coming in the doors, so that's a big thing for us. We've actually had an audit performed on ProctorU, and I know some other companies have as well, by ACRO, the American Association of College Registrars. And we also recently signed the Student Privacy Pledge, joining Apple and Microsoft and Google and Khan Academy. And what that does is it talks about the way that you're going to collect and maintain student data and taking a pledge that you're going to do that properly. So student privacy, student data, those can be kind of murky terms, but when you sort of funnel it under the umbrella of FERPA, that's when it becomes a little more clear about what you can and can't do and what you should be doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. What I want to do now is go to some of the questions that are coming in from the chat. And first, what is the average turnaround time for proctor reports? So are there volume limitations, i.e., if the program has monthly cycles of tests and they're high volume at each of these months, how does that go? Or what is the turnaround time for the proctored environment to get back with the faculty member or the instructor? I'll go to Jared first and then Doug.
Yeah, so again, it depends on the situation. Under normal circumstances, it's 24-hour turnaround on any kind of report, and that gives us enough time to vet it, get all the information together, make sure that all the pertinent evidence is included. The other situation would be if, as we talked about before, if a faculty member is connected to us in real time, we can communicate those issues to them in real time for certain exams. It just kind of depends on exactly how we want to set that up with the partner.
Yeah, Justin, this is Doug Winnick at Software Secure. Our average turnaround time for the reports that I showed on the screen are typically 3 days, 3 business days, and we guarantee 5 days, and that doesn't matter what time of year it is or what the volume is, because it's a cloud-based system. We've got a very large infrastructure set up to deal with high volume. That's a new thing in proctoring, right? Not to have the instantaneous results of having a live proctor. And for the most part, 3 days is more than sufficient for most institutions once they discuss how they've done things in the past, where they've found that 90% of the cheating episodes that are discovered occur weeks and months later. Not that they occur weeks and months later, but they're discovered weeks and months later. Having a thorough thorough review and making sure that every single thing has been checked has been a valuable resource for all of our customers, and they've been quite pleased with that level of turnaround. That being said, we do have some institutions that do require, for special reasons, it's usually financial reasons, the need to tell their students right away whether or not they passed or failed in terms of the integrity check before they move on and take their money, in which case we have made special accommodations and can abbreviate that, can accelerate that review factor down to a day if necessary.
Great, thank you both. The next question I want to go to, and I want to start with Jeff. Do you have any recommended courses of action for a faculty to follow once an incident report is received?
Yes, so some of our clients, what they do is they actually take some of the faculty out of the first loop. And they have a point of contact, a central person. In some cases it's in student services. And the information on, for example, the real-time event notifications goes to that particular assigned individual, who then reviews it and may augment that information with other internal information, such as, is this a student that's under academic default, or has there been an error in transcription errors noticed somewhere, or has there been any other reasons to suspect that this is a student that has been doing some other suspicious activities. You combine that information with the information that we provide, which is all actionable information, and there's charts and records of all of the information that we look at, because we look at time and location, activity, and history. And we can look at any time period, and we go back, in some cases years, to take a look at that entire picture of those behaviors by a student in a class or a series of classes. So the point of contact then has the capability of either making a go or no go decision, and some of those decisions are already business policies that are made. So things occur such as that student gets grade F, that student is given a warning letter or a series of warning letters, and other sort of reprimands, or they just are put on a watch list. In one situation where we presented a case study with one client, all 58 of those students did not appeal any of the reprimands or decisions.
So, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Jared or Doug, would you like to talk quickly about process that you might recommend for faculty to, if an incident report takes place?
Yeah, I'll jump in anecdotally and just share a couple things. The most important thing that we recommend to institutions is that they enforce their policies, and that's not always the case. And it's fascinating. It's a fascinating seat that we sit in to review the data and evaluate the percentage of students that cheat and how that changes over time. You know, when we first started proctoring, we had a different offering that used a bunch of technology to automatically assess whether or not there's too much motion in an exam, and therefore the school should take a look at it. We did motion detection. Sorry, I was lost for words. And there's so many false positives that a lot of faculty members just never reviewed that. And I think that's a problem with automated proctoring in general still today. But what was so interesting was we were able to track the percentage of cheaters and watch that percentage really grow when it's not being enforced. So we've taken two tacks. One is we look for suspicious activity, integrity violations. We send that to the school, and we hope that they do something about it, and we track the statistics going forward in terms of whether or not cheating's gone up or down the longer they've used our product. The other thing that we do is we also flag what we call policy violations. Those are instances where a student violates an exam policy, but actually the integrity of the exam wasn't suspect, right? So someone came into the room and spoke to the candidate, but they didn't actually talk about the exam. So there was no cheating, but they broke a rule. And what we're trying to do is really level the playing field. So if that were done, you know, with ProctorU or in a test center, someone would say, hey, you shouldn't do that. And what we're doing is we're training students to follow follow the rules when they're doing a self-service automatic proctoring process like they do with Software Secure. So we send students, unless the school object, automatic notifications of any exam policy violations that they have committed and say, this wasn't an integrity violation, but please follow this particular rule, and we cite the rule. And they get it in an email, and they get it the next time they log into the system. And what's incredible is, for a new institution, the average exam policy violations can range from 15 to 30%, right, where students are doing something that we really don't want them to do. And after they've taken an exam and seen that it works and they're getting notified, that percentage drops down to 7 or 6 for exam policy violations, and drops even further for cheating. So, long story, sorry, just to say what we do is we encourage schools to really enforce their policy.
Yeah, and I'll jump off that real quick with Doug to echo that. I think it is extremely important that you enforce your policies. I think it's important that you actually sit down and figure out what your policies are. I'm sure Doug and Jeff can attest to the fact that one of the most challenging situations for organizations like ours is to walk into a school and try to help enforce academic integrity and sort of come to the realization that we might not have ever sat down as an education community and really thought what the standards really were before we brought them online, right? Before we brought online education into the picture. So it's really important that you actually sit down and say, you know, what's acceptable for me? It can't be 100% cheat-proof. No, nothing is, right? And so you have to sit, what's acceptable, what's not, what is our quality control process, and really walk through that. And that helps you set the tone for figuring out exactly how you should react to different things that are going to happen.
Just if you don't mind, I just want to throw one really fast one in. Just I think it's critical in terms of how we address the market. All of us, all of these proctoring products and authentication products enable institutions to get the process of catching cheaters and stopping cheating out of the hands of teachers. And I think it's incredibly important that that isn't the role of a teacher. And so we are firm advocates of what Jared just said, sort of looking at the institution as a whole, seeing how you want to enforce these policies and figuring out how to do it. And really, we enable you to take that out of the hands of the teacher and have an admin understand the process and enforce the policy and make it easier for students to test with integrity.
Thank you both. Now what I want to do is turn to Karen Solomon so that she can talk to us a little bit about what accreditors are thinking when it comes to student authentication and identity verification. Karen?
Karen, if you're getting feedback from your mic, I suggest that you undo your headset and just use your computer onboard mic.
Okay, Megan, is this better?
That's great.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. Technology challenges at best. So accreditors actually were assigned some roles in verification back when regulation passed in 2010. The regulation was intended to limit potential fraud and abuse, but it was also expected to protect academic integrity. In terms of fraud and abuse, we were challenged from the get-go because the regulation allowed for passwords, which really drew back the amount of push we could give to our institutions in terms of how secure they should have their systems and be able to verify the students that are actually involved in these courses. That's been challenging for us since day one. That's still in regulation at this point in time, so that's what we need to work from as an accrediting agency. In terms of protecting academic rigor and integrity, the regulation was actually very imprecise. It was not well tailored. Once again, putting accreditors sort of in an interesting box from that point. There wasn't in that regulation any basis to determine that academic rigor on the online environment was any more at risk than students that are taking on-ground classes that may have someone assist them in their homework or may send somebody else in to take a test for them or things like that. So that was also a challenging point. When an accrediting agency completes a comprehensive evaluation of the institution, there is a piece of work that an accreditor needs to do to support the federal government. We serve as gatekeepers, and in that role as a gatekeeping agency, we do a bit of evaluation of some federal compliance issues. In this instance, we would look to institutions to determine what methods they use to verify student identity. And we still allow login and password, proctored examinations, or some of the other new technologies that are emerging. And we ask institutions to provide evidence that they have that in place and they're following that in practice. We also ask institutions to disclose prior to enrollment, and this is a question that's already come up here in the chat line today, to disclose prior to enrollment if additional costs will be charged for student identity or for the proctoring or things like that. So it should be clear and spelled out completely in tuition and fees or in the student catalog or things like that. And then lastly, you've heard this afternoon a wide range of examples of how the gentlemen here in these organizations are working to ensure student privacy. That's also what we're looking for. But we've seen examples in the past of institutions having students videotape the room or space that they're working in, and those videotapes are stored at the institution, not secured, very high levels of concern about privacy and how that information could be mined or used by other sources. So those are the things that we are looking for in a federal compliance review. Our institutions are expected to submit evidence to that, to those issues, and then our peer reviewers are asked to verify that that's actually taking place. At this point, we really need clearer direction from the federal government in terms of what the expectations are. When we think back to the potential for fraud and abuse, that's not really something an accrediting agency can manage well. The federal government, the Department of Education, Federal Financial Aid Division probably has a much better ability to monitor potential for fraud than an accrediting agency does, because we don't have access to those types of records and things like that. In terms of student student identity and things like that, the department's been silent for years. The recent information coming out from the Office of Inspector General may push for some changes going into the future. Justin, that's all I have at this point in time.
Great. Thank you, Karen. I do have one quick question for you. You talk about providing evidence. So if a school was using one of these third-party proctoring solutions, what type of evidence do you think the school should provide in terms of their accreditation review that would help with these issues?
Well, think about some of the examples that were just recently talked about reports that come to the institution, and then how the institution has acted on those reports. Providing evidence of, here are a series of violations that we found with students, here's how those individual cases were managed, or here's some additional training and education we've given to students over the years to try and bring that, that potential down. So we'd be looking for reports. We'd also be looking for information on what is provided to the student about, for example, a proctoring expectation. The times and availability, and also maybe that students have responded in the student survey that we send to all institutions. They may have responded that they really appreciate the opportunity to test by not having to go to the campus, by other alternatives the institutions provided, and things like that. So we may get some different sources from different areas of the institution, different people. Faculty may be commenting about it with interviews with the reviewers when they're even on the campus.
Thank you, Karen. Now, I want to turn to a couple of other questions, both from the chat room and then some of the pre-discussed questions with our presenters. But first, competency-based education, or CBE, is starting to be very popular with both distance and online programs and some campus-based. Very quickly, I'm wondering if our speakers would like to discuss how your products might work with competency-based education.
Yep, I'll jump in first. You know, we do quite a bit of examinations each month, in the north of 10,000 exams a month, I think, for competency-based programs. And so obviously, when you work in a competency-based environment, the assessment of the knowledge is usually a very tight sort of window. You're not looking at the entirety of a course or anything like that. It's a lot of times it's all on an examination. And so that makes not only the security of the academic integrity paramount, but you also have to worry about data theft. The examinations given in a competency-based program are extremely valuable for people that are looking to sail through that program quickly. So you just have to make sure that you're doing the right things to not just prevent the student from grabbing information from elsewhere and cheating on the exam, but actually stealing the exam and giving it to someone else or posting it online, which really makes that program have to start from scratch and build new material.
Justin, I'll add a couple thoughts as well. Competency-based education is a growing customer base of ours. It's a growing percentage of our current exams. And I think one of the reasons is, well, there are two reasons. One is the convenience of our program, right? Competency-based education is attracting a lot of busy individuals that are working full-time, and the ability to take an exam at any time without having to schedule it. Whenever they finish an assignment or get to a certain level and they want to start that exam, being able to start a self-service exam and go through that process has been very valuable for a variety of competency-based programs that have come to us recently. The other thing is the flexibility, the need to have different rules associated with different exams, right? Competency-based programs often enable students, test takers, to bring in a variety of information that they use to demonstrate their knowledge. And the flexibility with which we can assign different rules per exam and still have them accurately proctored without questioning the student what they're doing has also been deemed very valuable in the RPNow program.
This is Jeff with BSI. I think the only thing I can really add to what my colleagues just both said was from the flexibility side and from the day-to-day planning of busy individuals, you need something that they can do at their own schedule. And some of what we offer certainly is available 24/7, and the capability now of identifying or doing identity proofing at the front end of the first touch is also something that allows them then to continue on with a 24/7 with a BioSig whenever they are looking to have some sort of exam, quiz, or test, or any gradable event gated.
Thank you, Jeff. And I want to stay with you, Jeff. Could you tell us very quickly, what is multi-factor authentication? And from the industry perspective, are the terms identity verification and identity authentication communicating the same thing?
That's a great question. There's a lot of buzz in the industry about the different ways and means people are understanding different things. So let me take a try at this. Multi-factor authentication is often confused with what's called two-factor or strong authentication or multi-layer. So the strict definition of multi-factor authentication, which by the way is what President Obama's decree in October of 2014, he came out and clearly defined that multi-factor authentication is the new gold standard. This is what you need to have, and he's talking to all the agencies. So that means that all the banks and all of the other major institutions out there are going to be having to put in place a process for multi-factor authentication. So the way to remember this is very simple. Just think of the acronym called HAK, H-A-K. And the H stands for something that you have. And that could be a card, that could be a token. In some cases it might even be a phone. The A stands for something that you are, which is always a biometric. And the K stands for something that you know, whether it's a PIN or password, security questions, or otherwise. So multi-factor authentication requires 2 out of those 3 categories to be used in any identity proofing scenario. So to move it to the next level, I can share with the group that I sit on the committee selected by NIST at the federal government level, and along with 32 other banks and agencies like Homeland Security, DoD, LexisNexis, Intel, even some universities, legal associations, we're developing the new ANSI, that's American National Standards Institute for in-person and remote ID proofing and verification. So basically, there's a lot of activity around what is and what is not identity proofing, but maybe just trying to look at it from a very high level that might help the group is identity verification establishes that someone has knowledge or possession, and we can confirm this. So we don't know who that person is, but they know the correct PIN or password, or the answers to a security question, or possess the correct cell phone. So basically we're verifying that they have something, but we don't know who that person is. For example, with security questions, our group is establishing the fact that with the recent IRS breach, where over 50% of the security questions were correctly answered by the bad guys just by looking at social media. You know, it's really been reduced in terms of its effectiveness, for example, on some of the areas that we're covering off. Authentication differs because when we confirm the person is who they say they are, and this is usually done with a biometric because you need to authenticate to the physical person. So this again is part of the final audit report that came out by the OIG Department of Education, where they clearly said PINs and passwords aren't sufficient enough as a single credential anymore to allow us to understand who is actually taking the course and getting access to the coursework. And this is again part of the reasons why we're in such a quandary with identity theft, is we're still relying on single PINs or passwords as our only way to gate access to a virtual asset, in particular remote access, and we have to get better at this, and that's why multi-factor authentication is now saying you need to do more than this. You need to add more than a PIN or password. Add a biometric to a PIN or password and you've got multi-factor authentication.
Great. Thank you, Jeff.
I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, I think it does. Doug, last week the WCET member list was filled with discussions about who pays for proctoring. The institution, the department, the student. Could you tell us briefly what you have seen in terms of a campus philosophy or the business plan and the decision about who pays and additional costs to the students for proctoring services?
Sure. So every customer has slightly different needs and constraints. So we made sure to make our platform as flexible as possible. So let me give you some examples. Many of our customers choose to have their students purchase directly. And as Karen said, they're usually institutions that pre-planned, got ahead of it, provided enough notice, and explained the reason for the students doing so. And we simply pop up a merchant dialog box right before they authenticate, and they can pay directly via credit card. But we also provide options whereby students can purchase tokens from their bookstore. Even online students are purchasing things through the bookstore. In that way, schools are enabling them to facilitate the use of financial aid to pay for that, and they can come and get into a proctored exam by using tokens. And either they're paying for one exam or multiple exams, and they're buying packs of tokens, whatever makes the most sense for the school to offer economically. Unfortunately for us, there was no consensus early on in the market in terms of who pays. So now, fortunately for the market, we made it so that schools can choose any of the above options. At this point, I'd say 80% of our institutions have the student pay, 20% have the institution pay, and they're either billed a prepay and they're running down the number of exams they're taking, or they're being billed on a monthly basis. It's important to offer that flexibility to enable institutions to get on board as fast as they want.
Great. Thank you, Doug. Jared, September was Accessibility Month for WCET. What is the status of accessibility issues within the identity authentication or online proctoring industry?
Yeah, this is a really timely question. I think it's interesting that oftentimes we don't actually even consider accessibility when we're trying to figure out what the best way to go in any terms of technology and education, not just proctoring or authentication. And sometimes it gets sort of left behind, or something you think about, or there's this one person on campus that's loudly saying we got to consider accessibility, and they're not really being heard. I think it's important to remember that accessibility doesn't always have to be about the technology that you're using. The goal of accessibility is to try to make sure that anybody that comes through your institution can succeed and have access to all the things they need to have access to, and the other students have access to, regardless of any kind of challenges that they may be facing. And so that doesn't just mean that your technology has to meet certain standards. It means that you can use people on the staff of your vendors or people on the staff, certainly of your campus, to actually help that person through. And so what I've really found is that it starts with kind of a mental approach about, okay, we're actually going to tackle this problem. We're going to believe in what we're trying to accomplish here, which is to make this accessible to everyone. And it doesn't just mean that we have to beat everybody in the technology sector into having certain standards. It means that we're going to address each situation on a case-by-case and figure out what is the best way for this particular student. Does that mean we need to get them some additional time? Does that mean that we need to get them some additional resources in other kinds of technology to couple with it, or even a person to help them through that? And so it's hard to find a one-size-fits-all accessibility program. I know there's the VPAT that we have submitted to as well as voluntary to let you sort of go through and look at the accessibility of your technology, but even that doesn't really solve everything for every student. And so it starts with an idea that we're going to try to serve everybody, and then you really have to go through on a case-by-case for each student that you're trying to serve and figure out what works for them best.
Hey Justin, can I just add two quick things on that? You know, the fact that we're talking about accessibility is really exciting because it shows that proctoring has really become a much more mature market. It's really important. And Jared's right, there's no one answer. There are a lot of different solutions to help students with that require different accommodations. But Software Secure has made a substantial commitment to making the current and future versions of RPNow accessible, and has just recently contracted with the National Center for Accessible Media, NCAM, at WGBH in Boston to ensure that our forthcoming version of RPNow will be completely compliant with Section 508C, and all of our technology will be compliant, which is a change. We're really excited about it, and you know, you see other big players doing it in the market space. And now that we're working with edX, with Arizona State, you know, we're excited to sort of combine our efforts and make sure that we have a fully compliant program as it comes to technology, as well as making sure humans can help, as Jared described.
Excellent. And real fast, as we're coming up on the top of the hour, I want to ask one question that many of our students are very mobile friendly, and a lot of us are teaching and students are accessing our online classes via mobile devices. So first, are the products BioSig, ProctorU, Software Secure, are they mobile friendly and mobile accessible, and integrate them with LMSs?
This is Jeff. I'll maybe go first. We have somewhere around 15 to 16% of all of our clients, students, who are logging in and doing coursework on their mobile devices satisfactorily, and this is coming from 70-odd countries in the world. So we also have specific mobile applications that you know, speed up the process of getting you into the coursework that can be faster. We do some work in the banking sector for this as well. So I think that gives you an idea that the use is available on mobile devices, tablets, or PCs for us.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Jared or Doug?
Yep. So as far as mobile proctoring goes, I'll tell you that it's a subject that comes up sometimes. With all the partners that we've worked with, I've yet to find an institution that has told us that they really want us to go figure out a way to test mobily. And so while I think identity authentication in courses mobily is an important thing that all of us are getting into, all the vendors that you look at are certainly considering that. I don't think there's such a unique set of challenges to just to proctor remotely, just at someone's home, that if you sort of put the mode of communication all the way down into the phone, it presents a real interesting challenge to be able to secure that exam properly, make sure that no one's accessing information that they're not supposed to. And so it's certainly on our roadmap, as I'm sure it is Doug's and everyone else's. We haven't really found many situations where organizations are saying, you know what, we have to be able to securely test our students, and the only thing they can use is their phone.
Thank you, Jared. And I want to turn it back over to Megan with WCET for some final thoughts and to close out this webinar. Megan?
Thank you, and thank you to Justin for so adeptly moderating this conversation, and thank you to our wonderful presenters for sharing such great information. You can learn more about all of these topics, including accessibility, which we have a focus on at our annual meeting, November 11th to the 13th. If you're considering joining us, go ahead and register because we're running out of spots very quickly. We have a couple more webcasts coming up. We are doing a Google Hangout on October 6th. And in our EdTech series, as it continues, we have Out with the Old EdTech, In with the New, about LRM platforms. You can register for those on our website. I will be sending the link to the archive early next week. Thank you to Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available. Thank you to our supporting members that underwrite our events and programs, as well as our annual sponsors. Again, thank you everybody for participating today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webcast.
Thanks, everyone.